Welcome everybody to the fourth webinar of this series. So we have a series of 9 webinars on breastfeeding that will be running from now until the end of August. So I am Dr. Ernestine Leonze, and I'm the Associate Dean for Law and Police Studies here at York St. George University. So I research on shared parental leave and breastfeeding, so currently working on breastfeeding and its wider benefits, hence the webinar series. So I recently launched a documentary on breastfeeding, which is titled Breastfeeding Not on the Agenda. So you would have received links to this documentary in your Eventbrite. If you didn't, please feel free to drop a message in the Q&A and I will send a link to you. So the documentary was highlighting the benefits and challenges of breastfeeding to health, to economy, work, environment, and most importantly, the need for some change. So the documentary highlighted the urgent need for the government to put breastfeeding on the agenda because it doesn't seem to be on the educational agenda, family-friendly policies agenda, and the environmental agenda. So if you have not already done so, you can watch the documentary, you can follow the webinars, you can follow the petition. All the links are in the Eventbrite you would have received. So this webinar series is meant to give people information, talk to people about some of the challenges, highlight the benefits, and obviously, again, like I said, the need for the change. So I am very, very pleased to welcome a host of speakers here today. And we've got people from the Defense Breastfeeding Network. So I've got Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Buxton, who is an OBE. I've got Col Caroline Vincent, who is also an OBE. And I've got Lance Corporal, I'm doing well, Lance Corporal Natasha Day, who is an MBE, and we've got Corporal Malise here. Now, these people are obviously, as it says, in the military, and they'll be talking to us about some of the things probably we don't quite think about or know about or experience in our day-to-day lives just because of the nature of their jobs. So the aim of the network, the Defense Breastfeeding Network, is to support service women who are breastfeeding or pregnant service women aiming to breastfeed, and also support service personnel partners who are breastfeeding or aiming to breastfeed. It's so good that they were recognized recently in the King's birthday on the great achievement they've been doing on this work. So for me, I'm going to shut up there and I'm going to hand over first of all to Jonathan, who is going to start talking to us about all these things, and it's very, very good. And I'm so pleased that Jonathan, it's the first dad I'm having on the webinar. So it'll be great to hear from you all. Thank you. Jonathan, please.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to give a brief overview for a couple of minutes about where the Defense Breastfeeding Network came from and how we came about. So go back to 2017, and I was working in the sort of head office for the Army, and we recognised that there were lots and lots of sort of networks out there to support mothers, but nothing to support fathers. So in 2017, the Army and I set up the Army Parents Network, which was a network to support Army parents, and it's now grown to over 5,200 members in the network. And over the next few years, it trundled along supporting parents as a whole. However, in the last sort of 4 years, we've created 3 other networks within the Army Parents Network, which is the Defence Breastfeeding Network, which we're going to hear about today. But we've also got the Defence Child Bereavement Network to support parents who might lose children, and also the Defence Fertility Network as well, supporting people through their fertility journey. So you know, it's been a fantastic 6 years, and a huge amount that the Army has done over those last 6 years to support our parents and to help everybody get, you know, sort of with any problems that they might be having. And I think the Breastfeeding Network is probably the strongest of the 3 networks because of the passion that Natasha has got for this, and the amount of people that she's got on board, and how much she's done to support people. That's all I'm going to say as an introduction, and I'm going to hand over to Caroline to just talk a little bit more about her role in the Defence Breastfeeding Network. Caroline, over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Natasha, can you share your slides, please? Great, thank you. So you've been introduced to who all of us are. Natasha will speak shortly after me, bearing in mind that she very much is the person that drove this initiative forward. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of how the DBN became about, what we've achieved, and how it's been recognised so far. So the genesis of the DBN began in June 2020. At that particular moment in time, the Army had no policy or guidance for breastfeeding mums returning to work. And Natasha found herself returning to work with her son and found that there was a significant gap in this area. So being the passionate individual that she is, she started the Army Breastfeeding Network. She'll talk, I'm sure, about the village concept later on. But it was, if you think back to kind of June 2020, COVID was kicking breastfeeding support to your breastfeeding support groups and stuff. They weren't necessarily happening. There was very much a gap in that area. And as has already been mentioned, that the work that we do is very different. So the challenges we face are very different. So that kind of emphasised the need for some sort of informal peer support network. So the Army Breastfeeding Network began, and then it became clear that actually some of the challenges that the new mums and partners were facing wasn't just an Army sport, and then it became the Defence Breastfeeding Network. So what that means is we've got members from the Army, the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force and the Civil Service as well. And, you know, it's open to anybody really. So if you are a partner, you can join. If you are line managing somebody, you can join, because it's very much an informative, very supportive group. And we put policy on there, we update, we ask for ideas. It's very much driven from the bottom up. So if somebody's having an issue, they can reach in and the network will take it away and start working on that issue for the benefit of our people to improve their experience. We know that if we support our people, it's not any different in any other form of employment. If we support our people, they're more likely to stay. And obviously, you know, a career in the armed forces is a long career, and we want to support people through that period. So linking back to June 2020, there was nothing. July 23, the Defence Breastfeeding Network now has over 1,200 members, and it's growing on a daily basis. And, you know, they're active on there. It's not a dead network per se. You know, there's always questions on there, and everybody supports everybody on that. I've been involved with the network for probably about 18 months now, and I can honestly say there's never been any negative comments on there. It's fully supportive. Next slide, Tash. So what have we achieved since the DBN kind of became about? So the DBN has very much been a catalyst for strategic change. So whilst I talked about the support of the members, actually what it has done is it's enabled us to get the evidence to say to those above us, actually, this isn't quite right. We need to do something about this. So there's been a tsunami of initiatives that have ensued purely because of the genesis of the DBN, because it's been that forum where everyone can safely add their views and concerns. So to date, the Army, as Jonathan mentioned, is very committed to supporting the lived experience, in particular those areas where we feel we need some additional expertise to support various areas in peace. So I was appointed as the breastfeeding champion about 18 months ago, and that's very much to support Tash in her role in the DBN and what they want to achieve. I've kind of got that link into higher individuals, and I can link into people that support her with what she wants to achieve and what the network wants to achieve. We now have the first ever defence policy for breastfeeding. So it started with a guide for line managers, basically on how to look after Army people if they're returning to work post-pregnancy and feeding, and that very much grew, and it's now a defence-wide policy. So that's the first ever one. So that was quite an achievement. And actually that the kind of trigger for that was a poster, which is on another slide. You'll get a snippet of that. The poster was very much aimed at individual line managers to start the conversation. I'm sure many of you on the webinar will have experienced that it can be a bit of a taboo subject, and it was very much to, open the gates and start the conversation. When we started the initiative, we didn't have any breastfeeding rooms. We now have 83 breastfeeding rooms across the Defence. And we've launched an interactive breastfeeding room map. Within our roles, we often have to travel all over the places to go to promotion courses or meetings or whatever. And it became apparent that everybody was having great ideas and opening up all of these breastfeeding wellness rooms, which have got a lockable door, a fridge, comfy chair, somewhere where you can express your milk if you're returning to work. But there was no kind of coherence of it. So we've got an interactive map where literally you can put in the postcode of where you're going to, and it'll bring up the nearest breastfeeding room, wellness room, and it will give you a list of all the facilities within there and who the point of contact is. So no more is there, I'm going away for 2 weeks, what am I going to do? You can, go and see where you're going to be supported to continue to express your milk if that's what you wish to do. We have represented our work outside of the forces. So we recently had a poster at UNICEF. We've spoken, Natasha's spoken at various different webinars. So we're very much, kind of showing what we think is best practice, what we've achieved. We have got 63 nationally trained peer supporters. So I talked about how individuals support everyone on the network. Those individuals not only support on the network, but if, for example, there's a new mum who posts on the network that they've just had a child and they're struggling a little bit, Tash will put them in touch with a peer support worker, and they will go and visit that individual. And we've had some really good success stories. We've hosted the first ever UK Armed Forces Breastfeeding Institute. That was done at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, which is the area where the officer training is done. So that was...
Caroline, you're on work. Oh, she's dropped off, I think. I think she's died. So Tash, do you want to take over?
Yes, so I'll go from where we've hosted the first ever UK Armed Forces breastfeeding photo shoot. So those are the pictures that you can see on the left. One member is Army and one is RAF. It's very relaxed, as you can see. We didn't have many photos of women in uniform feeding in the UK, so this was the first of its kind, and we're really, really proud of that. We managed to get 16 mothers together, all with their babies. As you can imagine, trying to correlate a group photo with 16 babies feeding at the same time, nightmare. It was an experience. All volunteers that do this alongside their normal role. So that's comms lead, education pieces, people that deal with secretarial roles and bits like that. So it's no longer a kind of one-man band of us just parading around saying that we need more support. We have a group of us together, which has made life a lot easier. We attend defence health fairs, so we do pop-up stands where we talk about the network and just educate people, really. I think a lot of people, when you say, I'm coming to work and I'm breastfeeding, they genuinely believe that you're bringing your baby into work. That's not what it means for a lot of people. Breastfeeding is any method of removing breast milk. And so we're just educating people, really, and letting people know that we're there. They may not need it then, but they may need it in the future. And they may not be the person that needs it. However, they may go to work one day and somebody's returned from maternity leave and they're breastfeeding, and they can say, oh, a couple of years ago, I went to a health fair and there was a defence breastfeeding network. Have you heard of that? And so we're just spreading the word in that way. We are doing research into the benefit of the DBN, which has been conducted by an Army Public Health Registrar. We're just awaiting the results of that, as she's just gone on maternity leave, which is exciting. So this is the first time we've done any form of research into what the DBN has achieved, rather than having it on paper, and seeing the actual outcome and how it's benefiting our members and what we can do to improve. We've had the inclusion of breastfeeding in the law into annual army training. So every soldier must complete what's essentially your kind of manual I'm having a stroke, there we go, mandatory training each year, that essentially is sorry, I'm losing my words here. There we go, start again, Tash. That needs to be done by your employer. So we have the mandatory training that the Armed Forces asks us to do. We've had breastfeeding included in that, in our values and standards and our diversity and inclusion pieces. And again, it's just a blanket awareness, so people that know that we're here. And in terms of policy changes, thank you for whoever liked that, I'm struggling. In terms of policy, we've also had discussions with the higher chain of command about extra paternity leave. Now, it isn't paternity leave as such. However, it's extra leave for those who have had partners that have given birth and need a bit of extra time with them. So whether that's any form of complication, be that C-sections, people struggling with feeding, postnatal depression, struggling with childcare, that the chain of command, so our line managers, can allow an extra 2 weeks of compassionate leave in addition to paternity leave to allow people to support their family and friends better. There we go, we got there in the end. So I don't like this page because it sounds like a brag sheet. So on the left, it's the breastfeeding poster that we talked about earlier. So this was launched right at the start of our journey, so September 2020. And this was put into our Defence Primary Healthcare establishment, so our medical centres, our GP surgeries. And this is a poster. It's quite hard to see the text on it, but I'm more than happy to send it out afterwards to anyone that wants to see it. And it's just a little bit about breastfeeding. So it talks about direct and indirect breastfeeding, ways to express, be that hand expression, electric breast pumps, manual breast pumps, and a little bit of advice on how to actually express, how to store the milk, and what we are required to provide as an employer. And at the bottom, there's a little bit of a rough guidance of a timeline of how often people could be expected to express milk. As you can imagine, this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Somebody returning from maternity leave after 6 months will likely need to express more than somebody will who's feeding a 3-year-old. And that's kind of what that is. It's a little bit of a rough guidance for what the line managers can expect when somebody returns to work. However, we do stress the importance that it's a conversation between the person and their employer. The person that knows best about what they need is the mother. They will know what they need, and they're more likely to tell you exactly what they need. So there's a little bit of a timeline there about some awards that have been won. I'm not going to bore you with all of them because it's a little bit embarrassing. But the network itself won a Woman in Defence Award in 2021, that should say 2021. Which was incredible. This was the first time that we had been kind of recognised as a network. So to get a nomination was incredible. It felt amazing. And to actually win it, for the network to recognise in such a way, was just incredible. And recently we have won a Defence Acquisition Award. So this was for the work done on setting up the breastfeeding rooms, which is a really exciting initiative, and we can talk about it a little bit more if anyone has any questions at the end. But these rooms, as Caroline said, they are in line with Health and Safety Executive, lockable door, comfortable seating, fridge space, electricity, and a lot of them are zhuzhed up. They look really comfortable. We've got TVs, coffee stands, people put breast milk bags and pads in there for people that need them, and they're just dotted around the place. As we said, we've got the map that allows people to see where they are, and it also allows us to identify where we do have a gap. So if somebody says they're going on a course and they've had a look and said, oh, actually there's nothing near, that's when we can step in as a network and get something set up for them. So things that we're going to work on in the future. So we are planning the first ever sports day for pregnant mums and post-pregnancy mums, which is really exciting because I think something that the Armed Forces is very good at is protecting our people. We do a very different job. It's often very physical. So the second somebody is pregnant or postpartum, we protect them the best we can to ensure the health of them and their child. However, that sometimes means a bit of a blanket ban on doing anything. Actually, there's no reason a mum can't partake in certain activities. And so that's what this day is for, is to educate people on what pregnant women should be allowed to do in terms of exercise, and hopefully just have a bit of fun. We're also going to set up a guide for medical staff for breastfeeding mums, for combination feeding, for bottle feeding, so not just breastfeeding, but a little bit more awareness for healthcare professionals on how to support our people when they return to work. we are going to set up a commander's guide for breastfeeding mums. So we have a fantastic guide at the minute that is commander's guide for pregnancy, maternity and returning to work. We're going to do a specific strand for breastfeeding mums that gives the chain of command or our line managers exactly how to support our people. We are working on our first ever DBN conference. So hopefully in the next 18 to 24 months, we will be set up an in-person conference where anyone is welcome to come along, and we will talk about what we do, hopefully have a couple of the other networks there as well, and just kind of spread the word really. The idea is, in an ideal world, that this network doesn't exist in 10 years because we're in the place that we need to be in. But we're not there yet, but I am hopeful. And finally, we're going to set up a specific risk assessments library for complex roles where mum is breastfeeding. So we get a lot of questions about, actually, I work with a lot of oils and lubricants. Is it safe for my breast milk? So this will be a risk assessment library that has those kind of COSH questions there ready to go, so that we don't have to ask the if, we can direct them to exactly where. So if that's okay, I will pass on to the lovely Malise, who's going to talk about her lived experience of breastfeeding in the armed forces. So over to you.
Thank you, Tash. I joined the Defence Breastfeeding Network in November 2021 when I had my second baby. And this fell off from a conversation I was having with a friend, because I was telling her that when I had my first baby, I didn't have so much support when I was returning to work. So I was already dreading my return to work, even though I just had the baby. And then she told me about the Defence Breastfeeding Network, which I joined, and I had so much support. Prior to joining the Defence Breastfeeding Network with my first baby, I wasn't allowed to do a promotions course because I was breastfeeding. So I was downgraded. They gave a list of things that I couldn't do just because I was breastfeeding and I didn't have that support. At one point, I was going for a course. It was going to be for a week. And I asked to commute because I was breastfeeding. The place wasn't far from my home. It was just about 30 minutes drive. But then I was asked to stop breastfeeding and attend the course. And I was told that I wasn't allowed to commute. And it was so difficult because I just didn't get the support I wanted. So I went for the course, ended up having mastitis, and then I was thrown out of the course just because I was breastfeeding. But then after I joined the Defence Breastfeeding Network, going back to work was a different ball game. I had the commanding officer offering his office for me to express for them, so that to give them time to be able to source a room for me where I could be expressing. I had him speaking to my immediate head of department, asking her to give me extra breaks so that I could go and express. And of late, I went for a course and I was fully accommodated. I had everything set up for me where I could express, where I could store the milk. And it just made all the difference. So comparing having my first baby and my second baby returning to work, the second one returning to work has been a lot easier because of the enormous work that has been put in by Cash and her team in the Defence Breastfeeding Network. And there is support everywhere now. And lots of people in commanding positions are beginning to understand the importance, and they are seeing all the work that is at the background, and they are beginning to be more supportive and providing more help to women who are returning to work and are breastfeeding. So I am at a happy place, and I keep singing about the Defence Breastfeeding Network everywhere I go. It's just so helpful, and I just want everyone to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and that's really nice for me to hear. And as we're doing the right thing. A couple of things that I just wanted to add. Caroline mentioned, I'll talk about the village. It's one of my favourite things. So I'm going to presume everybody has heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. I love that phrase. What the army is very good at is picking you up and moving you 250 miles from your village that you've established and saying you've got a new job. And as much as that is, and it's part of the job, and it's fun and it's exciting, and it's, you know, one of the reasons we join, to travel and have new experiences. It's really hard when you've got a baby. And I can only draw on my own experiences, but I was 3 months pregnant when my husband was picked up and moved 250 miles from where I was. It was hard work. And so I then moved with a 3-month-old when I posted after having him. And I moved to a phase 1 establishment. So this is where we train our initial soldiers. And going back to work was really difficult, not so much for the breastfeeding. You know, I'd established that we were going well. We were 6 months in, and my baby was feeding really well. We got past the initial bumps and hurdles of things we needed to do. But going back to work as a new mum in a new environment is really difficult. I put this pressure on myself to work 3 times harder than everybody else to prove that I could do it. I put all this pressure on myself for no reason. It's all internal. But I was doing a full-time job in the day, and I was doing a full-time job at night, feeding my baby and keeping him going and trying to keep myself going and putting pressure on myself to get fit again, to lose the post-baby weight, to eat healthy, to exercise, to socialise, to make sure my baby was going to rhythm time classes and all the things that we do as new mums. And that's really hard. And so what we're aiming to do as the Defence Breastfeeding Network is to be that village. And that's for spouses and partners as well. Your partner is serving and they end up going off for 3 months or even going away for a week. It can be very isolating as a parent, regardless of whether you're feeding or not, when you're alone for the first time. And so we're aiming to be that village for people so that they can lean on us. You know, everyone tells you how amazing it is to have a new baby, but for everybody, it's not always as lovely. People have darker days, people have darker moments. I've definitely had some red mist at some points where you think, I can't do this anymore. And I'm hoping that what we are creating here is this community of people that not so much as sympathise, but empathise and can say, I understand what you are doing. I understand how hard it is. What can I do to help? And this is what the commanding officers I'm finding are doing really, really well within the armed forces, is stopping, listening and saying, what can I do to help you? And I'm really loving that. And I think Colonel Buxton is a great example of that. They have a maternity gym on site, and we have breastfeeding rooms there. And it's really amazing to see how much difference is created in the culture in the armed forces in the past couple of years. And I'm really excited to see where this is going to go in the next couple of years. I think that the theme for World Breastfeeding Week is making breastfeeding work, and I think the Army are doing really, really well in that. We are making it work. Now, we don't have it 100%. We still have kinks and bumps in the road, but we are getting there. We're working on so many things, and I think the rate in which we've progressed in the past couple of years is absolutely miraculous. Because as you can imagine, the Armed Forces isn't, it's a large organization. It's not the easiest thing to change, but we are changing culture and we are changing attitudes. And so for young soldiers, and same for the RAF and the Navy, people joining the military, when they come into their first place of work, seeing a breastfeeding room for them is going to be normality. It's not going to be this strange thing like it was a year ago when we started to introduce them. This will be normal for them. And that's what we're trying to create, that culture of normality, to completely normalize somebody feeding a 3-year-old, because it's normal. Socially, not so much in the UK, but we know all about that. But within the armed forces, this is a normal thing that we are doing. Service women should not have to sacrifice their work or their feeding journey for one or the other. We can do both. That doesn't mean we have to do both, but the opportunity is there if we want to. I think I've gone on enough now.
Well, thank you so much to all of you. Really appreciate, and some really good stuff there in terms of what you're doing, and hearing the lived experiences that you, Tash, and Malise has shared, and listening to what the network is all about. We can see how much difference is already making, and the impact of that. So really, really thank you for that. Just to our audience to say, if you've got any questions for any one of the panelists, please put it in the Q&A and we will answer them. But I do have a question which I can't help but ask, and this question I've been asked by so many people to ask you people today. So it's partially from me and partially from a number of different people. And the question is around the nature of your work. I think the perception, correct me if I'm wrong, the perception is that being in the military, we just generalize, in the military, We know about some really tough work that you people have to do there. So how does that fit? How does that work with being a mother and with being able to breastfeed, to carry on breastfeeding? So this will probably piggyback on Tash and Malise, your experience when there was nothing in place yet. So what are the challenges there?
Great question. So the first thing I'll start with, because I'm not sure who's in the audience, whether we have some non-military members, is to say that we have a really good maternity policy. We protect people very well. So post coming back from maternity leave, you are protected from deployments for 6 months. So with a 6-month maternity package, which is full pay for our UK Armed Forces, it can take longer, up to a year, but let's say a minimum of 6 months. You're then, for that 6 months, when you return back to work, you are protected from deployment, which gives you time to reintegrate back into the military, to get your fitness standards back up, etc., and allows us to iron out any potentially post-birth complications with physios, with doctors, etc. Now, if an individual needs longer, they will have longer. We will protect them for that time. And so please don't be under the illusion that somebody comes back from maternity and then goes, actually, you're off on a deployment for 6 months, pack your breast pump, because that's not how it works at all. What has changed in the policy is, as I said, it was a blanket no before. You're breastfeeding, you're not doing anything, you're not going anywhere. That has been changed. So we now see breastfeeding as a logistical issue and not a medical issue, which means it just takes more planning. So what we do ask is that members of the armed forces remember what their job is. You know, we are soldiers, we are people, what do we call aviators now, and sailors, and that is our primary job role. However, we are very supportive of parents, and the Army Parents Network has myriads of questions about these kind of things, and they're very good at supporting people. So if a deployment was to come up, unless your unit is on readiness, which means you've got a certain hours of notice to move, so let's call it 24 hours, you could be told in 24 hours you're going. Unless your unit is on a readiness like that, then you generally have a lot of notice if you're going somewhere, which means you can put provisions in place. Now, something that we're asked as parents is to come up with a robust childcare plan, regardless of how we feed our children, so that if we are to go somewhere, even if it's for a day, for a week, for a month, that we have childcare provisions in place. And that usually means relying on friends, family, childcare providers, etc., partners, etc. So we have that to fall back on. Now, in terms of breastfeeding, there's no reason that you can't continue to breastfeed. Now, again, it's going to be individual circumstances, where you're going, what you're doing, how long for. But let's draw on one of my experiences. So at, I think my boy turned 1, so I fed mine until he was 2.5. He'd had his first birthday because I'd come out of my protected bubble, and I went into the field for a week, which essentially is what you think of army, kind of living in the woods, with no electricity as such, etc. And I did that for a week. I took a manual breast pump with me, and the chain of command, our line managers, were fantastic. And they do have some electricity for their headquarters, so they organised that I could have a plug space. I took a mini fridge that I plugged in. I was given the time and the space and the privacy to express my milk, put it into the little fridge, and every time it got 3/4 full, somebody took it back to camp for me and put it in the freezer. And that was my personal experience. It's not the experience that everybody has. Sometimes it might be necessary to pump and dump. It may be that you're only going for 2 days, or somebody lives nearby that can come and collect your milk, or for whatever, however we figure it out. But it can be done. It's difficult. It's not normal as such. You don't expect breastfeeding mothers to be sat under a tree with a manual pump, but it's doable. And what we ask from line managers is to give somebody 8 weeks notice if they are going to go anywhere. And what that allows is potentially to either cease breastfeeding if that is what they want to do, or to change their breastfeeding method. So, for example, I pumped exclusively when I went back to work with an electric pump. I wasn't really used to a manual pump. So that 8 weeks notice gave me time to go, I'm going to switch to a manual pump and get used to it. I'm going to get used to hand expressing so that I can prevent mastitis. And we then educate the chain of command on the signs and symptoms of mastitis, so that if anybody does start to get any of these symptoms, they can stop and they can get medical attention straight away. So we are putting a lot of risk factor provisions in place to support our people. I don't want people to think that we just send people off to war and leave their baby at home stranded. I promise that's not how it works, but it is very individualized. So people are doing different things, different roles. We have so many different career opportunities within the armed forces. And I think the longest I've been away from my boy was probably 4 weeks while we were feeding, and I pumped and I came back absolutely petrified he wouldn't latch back on, and he did as if nothing had changed. So I was very, very fortunate. And hopefully that's what people are experiencing more and more now, is that we have the support to do so. This is a job, it's an incredible job, and it's one of the best decisions I ever made joining the army. And I love the way in which the army has supported me to continue to feed. Hopefully that answers the question, sort of. I don't know if Malise has anything to add.
Yeah, thank you. Malise, do you have anything to add, and probably maybe touch on how, with your first child, how did you then navigate the breastfeeding journey?
Oh, with my first child, I was already planning to leave the army because I felt like I wasn't supported. And if I was going to have a second child and it continued like that, to me, I was looking, my family is important and they should try to look after me as well. But then when I then joined the breastfeeding network, I just had a lot of support. Like with my first child, like I was saying, I went out, it was just for a week though. I wasn't living far. I was asking to commute, but I wasn't permitted to commute. I took my pom along with me and it was taken away from me because they said the voltage was too high to use in the blocks. That is how I ended up with mastitis. And then I was kicked out of the course and I was told to stop breastfeeding. That was the experience I had before. But then after, it was just different. I go to work with my pump. I have a room to go and express. Even when I went out on field, I used to sit at the back of the van. They would give me enough time to express, and then they take the breast milk back to camp. And then I had to go somewhere in June, and I was informed in January. So I had a whole 6 months to make amendments and preparations for that. So there's a lot that has changed, and there's a lot more support now compared to what it was in the past.
Thank you so much, Malise and Tash, for answering that. And I think, Tash and your team, you should be super proud of your achievements. And hearing from Malise, she was planning on leaving the job entirely. So you've kept her there. You've changed her experiences. You've changed how she perceives the job in itself and the support. And I think that's incredible. Thank you so much. We have some questions. I've realized that Jonathan was answering some of them, so it's disappeared from my screen because Jonathan has answered. So what I've got on screen is another question. It's not a question, but it's more saying, well done for the good job that you're doing. So Sarah is talking about the progress since it all started and saying, well done to you all. There's one here, probably I'm just going to read it as it is. Well, it says not a question, but just to say this is really amazing and I applaud you all for the fantastic work. I work for the NHS in an infant feeding role, and we can often feel lonely and isolated and feel we are chipping away to make feeding babies better for families. And that is an enormous task. To hear about this today has been so positive and really lifted me and made me much more optimistic about positive feeding culture in the UK. Thank you so much, Sharon, for saying that. And again, it goes back to the work that you're doing. It's incredible. It really is incredible. I mean, like you were saying, Tash, earlier on, Breastfeeding Week starts next week, and it's all about making it work. And going back to work is one of the key barriers to breastfeeding. Research has demonstrated that the lack of support in the workplace is what really kills the dream for most mothers who intend to continue breastfeeding. And it's incredible to hear what you're doing in the force, is that the right word? In the forces. But the key question is, how are you reaching out to all the mothers? So what are you doing to ensure that all mothers, and like you said earlier, maybe potential mothers or expectant mothers know about this group and get that support? Because I think from what you were saying, you have about 1,200 members. And I think in the grand scheme of things, that's incredible, but I think we still have a lot of mothers out there. So what are you doing to reach out to all these mothers?
So we constantly send, so we have obviously our internal Facebook group, and we do rely on a lot of word of mouth. Obviously that's how Malise heard of us. We've got people, oh, yes, go for it. If you we're a little bit fuzzy still. Have we got you?
Caroline, you're on mute. If you are talking, you're on mute currently, Caroline. Oh, Tash, oh, we've got her back. She's coming back.
Yes. So no. Can you hear me now? I wasn't talking. So if I start from the...
Oh dear.
Losing you, Caroline.
We're losing
Can
you.
you hear me?
No, not really, unfortunately.
Not really.
Maybe, Tash, do you want to come in there, please?
I'll try. I'm not going to answer as well as Caroline, but if you want to type it, I can read it out. So a lot of word of mouth, without a doubt. I'm quite active on social media, so I talk a lot and do a lot of raising awareness through that. We are not quite. We're doing a lot of traveling around to these kind of health fairs that we talked about earlier, so we get around the country.
Okay. I'll put something in the text. If you want to
like a robot, isn't it? Yeah, we can't quite hear you there, Carol. I think you said you're going to pop something somewhere, so hopefully it'll come up in a chat or a Q&A soon. But it is difficult spreading the word. It is hard, and I think with things like infant feeding support, you feel like you have to scream from the rooftops about it all of the time just to catch people's attention. But we are spreading the word, and I'm not quite sure how, whether it is word of mouth or, you know, social media or bits and pieces like that. But the difference between from me talking about what we do in 2020 and having a group of people go, oh, to the conversation that we're having now, where people come up to me and say, you're the Defence Breastfeeding Network. Tell me about it. What can I do to help you? And we've got people like the Army Sergeant Major on board, you know, the Chief of General Staff, we have Commander Field Army, all these people in senior positions asking how they can help. Now, we have an incredible two-star in Army headquarters who helped us with the funding for our breastfeeding rooms. Now, what he agreed to do is every time he does a visit, which is a lot because he's in charge of infrastructure, he asks them whether they have a breastfeeding room or not. If they say no, he tells them to email me. Now, when you're told to do something by a general, you do it generally. So we get a lot of emails that say, I've been told to email you by so-and-so. What can we do? And we're getting lots of rooms set up that way. So we're getting in touch with people in the far corners of the armed forces. We have rooms set up in Cyprus, in Gibraltar. We have, we have a room set up in Belize. That's amazing because we have armed forces families there. So we are reaching people. We're training these peer supporters so that they, as I said earlier, people move around the country. We train somebody that's currently posted to Aldershot, but next month they can move to Catterick. So they're then raising awareness there. So as we move around the UK, as time progresses, we are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, in the first month, we started off, I think, with 80 people. And I thought, oh, there's 80 people in the army that are breastfeeding. That's amazing. And now we're up, and as Caroline said earlier, new members are joining every single day. So we are getting bigger, we're getting stronger. And the more people that are on board, the better we and stronger that we are, which is incredible.
That's fantastic, Natasha. Thank you so much. I'm also aware that in the audience we have some infant feeding leads from NHS and the rest of that. You did say something in the presentation about speaking to healthcare professionals about supporting your mothers. So I wondered whether you have any top tips or some key things that you want to say to health professionals about supporting mothers that are in the army.
I think a lot of it. So for those that don't know, I'm a paramedic by trade. So I'm posted to the NHS at the minute, so I'm out seeing people on the daily. I think a lot of things that people need to know is what is normal newborn behaviour. As a straight up, what is a normal newborn behaviour? I think lots of people, my family were the worst. If you give them a bottle, they'll sleep for 4 hours. That's not how it works. So, you know, we talk about responsive feeding for both mum and baby. So it's educating yourself on that. Educate yourself on the 4th trimester. What does that mean? What is normal newborn behaviour? And how do we support mums? From a medical perspective, that's usually fairly easy. We can signpost to a lactation consultant or a midwife or an infant feeding lead for a latch assessment or a tongue tie assessment and all these things that come with that. But how do we support mums when they're at the end of their tether because they haven't slept and their nipples are sore, and they also have a toddler that they've got to get to nursery and they're working from home on their laptop? How do we support them? We create that village, that community. Can we look after their mental health? How do we look after their physical health? Is there somebody that can go and cook them a hot meal and drop it round and feign ignorance that they made a little bit too much for their own dinner and thought of them? Can someone go around and check on them and hold the baby while they have a shower? You know, it's all these little things that we don't think about when it comes to infant feeding. It's the bigger picture, and that's supporting any new mother, not just somebody that's breastfeeding. You know, it's a hard job that we do. And I saw something incredible that said that on average, women feed in the first year for 960 hours, where a full-time job is 1,010 hours. That baffles me. We're doing 2 full-time jobs at the same time and we're still bossing it. You know, we're still doing things like we're doing, like promoting and going on courses and excelling in our career and juggling everything else that we need to do. And that's what I would like to educate people on, not just the healthcare side. Obviously, in terms of actual healthcare professional stuff, we're talking about educating doctors and medics in the army on signs of mastitis and, you know, where we can signpost people to. A lot of the education I do is about signposting. We're not infant feeding experts in the army. We're not meant to be. I don't want people to be as such, but I want them to know where these people are. Things like the breastfeeding network, the drugs in breast milk service, fantastic thing for healthcare professionals. Is the medication that we're offering to people safe? Check. Really simple. We have the GP infant feeding network, or known as Milky Medics. Brilliant people. Signpost to them. GPs, do you know, are we giving people the right information? Are we getting informed consent? Are we putting the mother and her baby at the center of our treatment? That's important. Telling people to switch to a formula to give their breast a rest, or because they're not making enough milk. It's just a lack of education for people, and we're still finding it. You know, I still meet people that say, oh, my health visitor said that I shouldn't be breastfeeding through the night because it's bad for their teeth. Bah. Let's educate people. Let's talk. Let's have the conversation as adults. Let's inform people of evidence-based practice, and that's what we're trying to do.
It's really so good to hear that, Tash, because that touches quite nicely on one of the big issues or the big call to action thing that I'm doing, because the key thing here is, unfortunately, breastfeeding tends to be missed in education curriculum, even for our health professionals. So I used to say that when I hear that our health professionals are not giving the right information to mothers, I used to say, oh, they're doing a bad job, but really it's not their fault. Breastfeeding isn't part of their training. It's not in the curriculum. And that's why we like you're saying, drugs in breast milk, all these different people, they've gone an extra length all by themselves to learn all of these things. So that education is absolutely critical to everyone to help support all the mothers. So amazing. Thank you so much. There are 3 comments, not questions. We have 3 comments and they are all very good comments. I must say that everyone is just like me, really, really excited to hear about all this great work that you're doing. So Oh, another one is popping there. Let me see. So there are 3 comments in there. They are all very positive. I'm just going to read this one, which I haven't read, just to see what it says. So not really a question, but it sounds amazing. I used to work as a midwife in West London, and I've passed some information on to my team down there because I work with a lot of military families. Thanks for this information today and for doing such a great work for these families. Thank you so much for these comments. It makes me have a question, because like there was one of the posters that was in the presentation, and there are other information, great stuff that you're doing. And I just wondered how far and wide you are happy to share information, because I think some of the peer supporters who are working with military families, like one of our participants just said, it'll be good for them to really know that these things are there and the information just to pass them, even just a signpost that actually you do have this that they can rely on. So is it something that you're quite happy to share far and wide?
Yeah, so we have an actual Defence Breastfeeding Network poster that's got our contact information, where to find us, etc. on that. So I'll get that. If I get that to you, we can disseminate. There's also the Defence Breastfeeding Network on Instagram, which is open for everyone to follow. Our internal Facebook is closed for armed forces families. And this may be controversial, but I'll say it anyway. We do keep that shut for females only, or the breastfeeding parent, I'll say. Because we found that people were more comfortable sharing intimate details, things early on, especially people posting photos of cracked nipples and things like that, that people found they felt more comfortable, and so we've respected that. So we do ask that the non-breastfeeding parent doesn't join the internal Facebook group, but you can follow us on the Instagram. There's the poster, we've got an email address. I'm on Twitter as well, which is just my name, Natasha Day, so quite easy to find. You can ask me questions at any point. I'll try and get back to you. I am a shift worker, so please don't be surprised if you get an email back at 3 a.m. because that's my lunch break. But I will get back to you as quickly as I can. And we're happy to have as many people on board and get the message as far and wide as we can. So any help would be much appreciated.
That's fantastic. There is one question here. It says, very informative. As a non-breastfeeding parent, any timelines on hard copy information to units?
Yeah, so what I can do, Fred, I know you, I'll send you an email. So we have the posters, we have actual guidance on how to set up these rooms. It tells you what needs to be in there, where to acquire the funding, and I can get that to you as well. We also currently have the Commander's Guide to Pregnancy, Maternity and Return to Work, which has got some information in there. We don't have a timeline yet as of when the breastfeeding guidance will be out specifically, but I can get you a copy of the policy, because it's a work in progress. You know, these things take time, so I don't want to get people's hopes up by saying it'll be in the next month or so when it may not be. But I'll let you know, and I'll be very loud about it on my socials and stuff, letting people know when it is available.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And again, just to say, whatever information you are happy to share, if you want, if you send it to me, I can send it to everyone that registered for this webinar. I think we had 100 and something registered, so I can send it to all of those people. If you are happy, please just send me the information and I will do so. So just to draw this to a close, I just want to say thank you all so much for being here. I have learned an awful lot, you know, like everything else, any sector that you don't work in, you can only imagine what happens in there, and it's really, really good and really informative to hear all the great work that you've been doing and how it's been helping people, and the impact is so obvious. You have Malise talking about the impact right there, and many more people. So I just want to say thank you so much for giving up your time and for being here. Thank you to Caroline. Caroline, we live in a technology world, and the technology has a mind of its own, so it does its own thing, but I really appreciate you being here. Jonathan, thank you so much for bearing with me when I started contacting you and for answering some of the questions. Thank you. And Malise and Tash, thank you all for being here. Again, the recordings will be available. It depends on how busy my events team people are. Sometimes I say a week and they give it to me in less than 3-4 hours. But it's all on the breastfeeding webinar series. So it will be made available. And as soon as the recording is ready, it also will be emailed out to everybody that registered for this, because one of the things is that people are very busy. So some people register and they're unable to attend, but they will get the recording, so they will still be part of it. So thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And Tash and team, please carry on with the great work that you're doing. A lot of change and impact in people's lives. So thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your day. If you have sun where you are, please enjoy it and send me some. But thank you all.